Hi, I'm Elena Koger, and welcome to MVN. In this episode of What's the Issue, we will be discussing segregation then and now. We'd like to provide a quick disclaimer that this podcast includes courageous conversations including race, stereotypes, politics, and personal experiences. We'd also like to make note that the people mentioned are no longer affiliated with HCPS. If any of these topics could be potentially uncomfortable, we suggest you exit now. Thank you.
Hi, I'm your host, Colby Davis, and welcome to this week's episode of What's the Issue. Today we'll be talking about segregation then and now and whether or not it still affects us. In 1954, Brown v. Board of Education decided that public schools would no longer be segregated by black and white students. However, it is easily arguable that people are still segregated based on politics, based on test scores, and other things. So, what we are going to look at now is, how do people segregate themselves, and do people still intentionally segregate themselves? So, let's talk about it. Anyone have any thoughts on whether or not segregation is still a thing, how it affects us?
I think segregation is definitely still a thing in our society, in our world. Maybe not as much here as in other places, but it's still a lot here.
Here meaning like where? Like here?
In like United States. Other countries, they have it worse than us sometimes, but we still have struggles and, stuff we need to work on in America.
I feel like in America, a lot of us experience segregation, I'd say, than it actually being like put down like, oh, this is segregated. But I feel like we experience it every day in school because how we group ourselves based off of society, and the cliques, they end up being grouped by race most of the time.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And not just that, I feel like we still segregate like ableism. Like people with special needs a lot of times are overlooked or thought of in a specific way. And I feel like when we look at segregation, it doesn't necessarily mean what it used to, but it still happens.
Yeah.
I mean, we look at our politics, and it's like we segregate each other based off our political beliefs. We've become a country that's so divided on every single issue. There's no longer acceptable for there to be a middle ground for some reason, and I don't think that makes much sense. We should be able to have different beliefs, but at the same time come to the table and talk about the issue and figure out a way and a solution that works best for everyone.
That's true. I understand that.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like even though everybody has their own differences, doesn't mean we should be segregated per se, because that's another argument that happens every day at school too. Like, we group ourselves based off the things that we believe or what we like to do, and that's a form of segregation because we're not all one together.
Right. And I just also feel like, how people like segregated themselves between like water fountains and different things, and even like schools. And like now, even though we are together, it's just like we're even more segregated because of racial views, political views, somebody being a Republican or a Democrat. So like, I don't know, I just think that racism I feel like it's still here today.
It hasn't gone away.
It hasn't gone away. It's changed forms of how we see it.
I agree.
Back then, it was such an obvious thing. But now it's the little things that we don't necessarily think about. I mean, if we look not just at racism, but think about like a grading system. We judge people based off how they do at tests, how they do in school. We judge people based off of what they look like, what they wear, how they act.
Like how you said with the things in school, how we're grouped based off our academic ability. That's a form of segregation because everybody isn't in the classes together.
Right.
And I feel like when it comes, sometimes we're grouped athletically based only on appearance and not our actual ability.
True.
If someone sees someone, they look at their body and automatically assume whether or not they're athletic, when that's not always the case.
That's true.
And just one sport may take a different type of athleticism than another.
That's true.
And
can we all share a racial experience that we had?
Not racial.
not
But not racial, but segregation.
Segregation.
But per se. We can start at the head of the table.
Well, an experience that I had was a little over a year ago. I was called a bunch of racial slurs by a bunch of people of another race, and it was very traumatic for me. Like, it made me rethink myself about being black. Like, is it, is that a bad thing?
Right. Like, is it like right?
Like,
Like, is it good to be
yeah,
black?
like, is it good to be black, or am I bad because I'm black? Like,
Yeah.
it just really hurt my feelings, and I just could not believe like the words and like it was some stuff like I've never heard before. Like,
Right.
how do you come up with that?
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of my personal experiences was actually in middle school, where I had a teacher who would separate us based on our color. So it could have been like black, black, white, white. And then one time we confronted her about it, and she said, don't pull the race card on me. So then the next day we walked into our classroom. She had changed the seats to a circle, and then we sat in a circle, and it was black, white, black, white. So she tried to intertwine us just because we told her that she wasn't being fair on where we was being seated at. But yeah, that's one of my experiences with racism.
My personal experience, I have been in interracial relationships, and when I'm out in public, there are older people of my race that will stare us down and watch us walk out the building and give us dirty looks, whatever the case may be. But it's always been super duper uncomfortable for both of us, just because why are you looking at us a specific way? Because we're not bothering anybody. The fact that you should be able to love who you want to love and be with who you want to be with, and to segregate people based off of that when that issue has been resolved way, way, way before now. It's just not appropriate, and I feel like it's super disrespectful.
It is.
Yeah, even when we go out, people look at us like we're kind of crazy.
Yeah,
like, what
even
they
with
doing
just
together?
friendships, like it's not. I don't understand why you shouldn't. Like, you should be allowed to be friends with
Whoever.
Based on, no, I don't look at color. We don't look at race. We're friends because we're friends, and to have to go out in public and worry about people staring at us and looking at us a certain type of way because one of us is black and one of us is white, it just doesn't make any sense.
Right. An experience I've had with segregation is one time I work with community organizations and things like that. So I was told to hand out papers supporting a person who was running for an office in the local office, and I was handing out papers for them, and then there were other people of a different political party and a different race demographic, and they kind of looked at me like, what is this little black girl doing here handing out papers at the voting poll? But I just feel like that more was like a humbling experience for me because I hadn't seen racism or segregation at firsthand, but that really showed me like people really think like this in this modern day century. Like, I don't understand it, but that was a humbling moment for me.
Okay.
And then one experience, I mean, it's not my experience, but one experience that I know of. So there's this woman I know of who's a little bit older. She told me about how when she was in college, she used to be a waitress at this restaurant. She's an African American woman, a very sweet lady. So they would always give her the African American tables because they stereotype that African American people didn't tip, which isn't true. But they assume because she was an African American woman that she didn't deserve the tips like they did. And I don't think that's right. And another thing I think about is the fact of how hard it is to talk about racism in America.
Right.
You think about all the red tape you have to cut through to try and figure out what's appropriate to talk about when it should just be able to be an open, honest conversation.
Right.
Okay.
I agree.
I honestly, this actually does have it has something to do with this, but not really. So the term African American, when I was in like this teacher's class, she brought up a story related to that. She said that Africans, they don't like when we call ourselves African Americans because we're not from Africa. Like, we're black. That's a term that they
is
like
a form of segregation
Yeah.
though, within
And
one
so-
population of people.
So really, like, what are we? Like, why do we have to be the term black? I don't know. It's
I mean,
just
I don't
something-
really classify ourselves. I mean, I guess we're called African American because we're black.
We're black.
However,
but we're not from
we're
Africa.
not from Africa, and so technically we are just Americans. Like
And
that's
you
all, and we
can-
shouldn't be.
And it's weird because you could be white and be African American.
Right. That's why I like the term better Black American.
Because like if you're a white person born in Africa and you move to America, you're African American.
American.
Like that's weird.
Yeah.
Like I don't understand.
Well, not just that. You think about it. I mean, it happens with everybody. If you think about people of Asian minorities, they're considered Asian Americans. If you think of people of Hispanic minorities, they're considered Hispanic Americans. But if you think of white people, you just call them Americans.
that's true.
It's
Because you're-
like, in a way,
Caucasian.
it's like, in a way, they're trying to lessen people.
That's true, but like not every Caucasian person is from America, so why aren't they called European American? You know, so it's just like
It's a form of segregation that have been predetermined by the people before us. Because we didn't go out here and be like, yeah, we're going to call ourselves African American. It's what we've always known, and it's preconceived separation.
That's
But
true.
just like I was saying a few minutes ago, I was saying like we call, like I don't think it's right to call African Americans African, just call us Black Americans. But in the way of thinking about someone who is from an Asian background, like you can't call them something based off their color because
Right.
like you can't describe and like
I
you can't
understand
put a
what you're
person to a
saying.
color.
I understand because you can't put a person to a color besides like if you're talking about white or black. So I feel like I understand the terms that are like so specific, but when you get into that, those are the only two groups that can be grouped. Because people are all many different colors. Like, but we've done some research, and it says that African American was typically used to refer to descendants of people from Africa who were enslaved. So the step down from our ancestors. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, but I just feel like even if our ancestors are long gone.
Yeah.
So it's 2022. It's time for things to change. It's time for names to change. It's time for people to change. It's time for everything to change because we're in a new world, and
It's a new era.
It's a new
time
era.
to change.
Yeah, and it's just time to cut out racism. It's time to cut out segregation between politics. Like you shouldn't not like somebody because of what they think or what they believe, and you shouldn't treat somebody different because of what they like and believe.
I feel like personally that I don't think that.
I feel like it's going to be a long time for a change due to the fact that, you have parents and grandparents that are still alive and,
Until
they
go,
had negative thoughts on, people of color.
And it might not ever change.
It
If
might
you
not
think
ever
about
change.
it.
I don't
Because
think-
like it's been so long ago. This is how many 4,000 years ago? Well, maybe not 4,000.
400.
400. And it's 2022 and we're still in the same.
Well, it's just because of the teachings, like, and it goes both ways.
They pass it down.
You pass down your views, and I mean, we're not going to get too specific on that, but y'all know what we're talking about. The views that are passed down from the generations before, if those people who were brought up in that era don't choose to change their ways and the way that they think, you're never going to make a change because those same people are going to pass down those views and that bias down to the people under them, their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just going to continue to be a cycle until somebody chooses to break it.
Right.
But if you're raised in a household, I mean, I know plenty of people that were raised in homes who, taught their children not to love everybody, taught their children racism and taught their children homophobia, and, just hate.
Right.
Taught their children hate. And until one of the children chooses to, hey, this is not the way I think, and I'm going to break outside of this box that you put me in, the cycle's it's going to continue.
Right.
Well, I feel like it's not necessarily just even the teachings. It is the teachings, but at the same time, a person is made up of the relationships they make. So it could necessarily be another person's teachings that they could learn from. Like they could have a friend that has those kind of beliefs, and they learn it from them. A person, who they are, is made up of their formative years. They learn from their parents, their grandparents, but they also learn from their teachers, the people they're surrounded by, their teachers, their classmates, their friends, their bus drivers. It's basically everyone around you contributes to who you are in some way.
Right.
And until all of those people, which is so many people, decide to change, it's not going to change.
But that
But the
goes
thing-
into everybody has a choice.
Everybody
Exactly.
has a choice.
Like
yes.
like you are your own person, and you should like don't let people influence you on what to believe. Because if you want to change your way of thinking, you can simply
do
do
that.
that for free. There's
Mhm.
no charge to
It
it.
costs nothing. It costs $0.
nothing.
0 cents.
But
So-
sometimes, that's hard for people to do in their households, especially if they're still living in those households. That's not easy to do.
It's not, but I mean, it always
They
is.
still have a
I
choice.
feel-
you still have a
they
choice.
can.
I mean, I
Yeah,
feel like-
understand
I
that.
feel everyone should live by the motto, I'm not the person today that I was yesterday, and who knows who I'll be tomorrow.
Period, I guess.
I mean,
Right.
it offers up a chance. Everyone has the chance and the choice to change who they are.
Mhm.
That's
They
true.
can change their beliefs. You can't always necessarily change your situation, but you can always change your outlook on it.
Right.
That's
And
right.
then there
That's
are the
true.
people who, like us, who, we all share similar beliefs, I feel like. I mean, I think we can all agree on that to an extent.
Yeah.
That we can continue to educate and teach people the history behind, like Leo was talking about racial slurs and stuff, the history behind those slurs and the
And
history,
those stereotypes.
yeah, the
And why not to
stereotypes,
use them?
and why, just like you were saying, like you teach your friends, the people that you surround yourself with. I mean, yeah, you're going to pick up on that. Like, just the way that people talk and the way that they act or whatever, you do that when you're around certain people. So I feel like if we continue to educate each other, our peers and our classmates and whoever else, then we'll get somewhere.
Because, I mean, my kids, personally, they're not going to be naive to the stuff that goes on around them, but they're not going to be the people who feed into it. Because you should know at home you're not taught this, and regardless, you should be the person who sticks out and says, this is not right, that's not right.
Right.
So it's all about breaking generational curses and
That's
things that have been put before us.
Right. I totally agree. And also, I feel like, yeah, like I feel like people should also, like you said, educate themselves on, segregation and just anything with like Black history and Black culture, because it is a major part of history and we should all be educated and learn about it.
Okay, so just in closing, I think we can go around, give our closing emotions, what we thought, some good points we talked about. Me personally, I think the biggest takeaway here is love yourself, love each other, be willing to learn from each other, be willing to both admit you're wrong and be willing to change your perspective and your opinion.
I agree.
Because
I agree.
that's the only way society will ever get better is if we're open to change how we think and how we see.
Yeah, you really took
Mhm.
the word out of my mouth. We need to get it together, really. To
Yeah.
break it down, we need to get it together. Because this hate that's going around is not going to help us any.
Right.
I think that we should stop necessarily looking at each other as categories and just see each other for what
As
we
one.
are.
Yeah.
We're all people and we should all love each other.
Yeah, we're all people. We all bleed the same color blood. We're all
We had all
humans.
We
the
all
same-
going to die.
We're
We
all
gonna-
humans.
Yeah. So I mean, either it's no need to bully or pick on any specific race just because of the color of their skin.
And
Or
Or-
a group
or
of
person.
people.
or a group
of
or
people,
anybody.
yeah.
I mean, there's no reason to pick on another person. I mean, if you don't agree with them, be willing to walk away or be willing to learn from it. But so Elena, what are your closing thoughts and emotions?
I just feel like everybody should be, like you said, open to discussion, open to change, and that's really all there is to it. We can make progress as long as those two things can be done.
Right.
Okay, Leah, what are your closing thoughts and remarks?
My closing thoughts and remarks are that I feel like this, it needs to change. I don't want my kids growing up in a society where they're judged
Right.
off of
Mhm.
anything. Like, I want them to be seen as like a person.
I agree.
Thank you for listening this week to this episode of What's the Issue. Stay tuned for more next week.